And I'm so grateful to our fellow panelists for being here today and to all of you for joining us for this discussion. As you all know, this is the second year now that we have not had a White House Correspondents Association dinner, a big event, typically every April. It's actually usually my birthday weekend here in Washington, so I know it well. But obviously COVID restrictions have put the kibosh on that. So we're excited to be able to have a conversation sort of more broadly about what it means to be covering Washington right now.
Thanks to Georgetown for sponsoring this. And you have no idea how happy it makes me to be around reporters where I don't have to answer for anything because I'm not responsible for anything. But I used to say that I liked being at that podium where I knew it was going to be on the front page before the front page was even printed. But that allowed for time for the front page to be printed. It allowed time for me to say things, reporters to think about it, reporters to bounce it off of other people, reporters to collect ideas about it before they just had to tweet, go on social media, speak to it, or just be inundated by what other people are saying on social media about something that instantly just happened. It was still a more reflective era and a slower era. And in that sense, it made for a better, more accurate news era. I think social media has changed reporters far more than it's changed the White House.
We have fabulously good truth manipulators in this country, augmenting the news cycle and our belief structure every single day. Misinformation and disinformation, much like technology, is not soon going to be unwound. And, we see it on almost every story. There's an alternative set, and I don't mean just an alternative set of facts or a disagreement. I mean, there are things that people believe in this country that have no basis in any understanding or fact, because it gets whipped around in an ecosystem whereby none of that is thought about or challenged. It's just read.
When you talk about trust, I think figuring out how you try to show people what trusted sources of information are is like something we are really grappling with, both as a media industry, but also from a political and communication standpoint as well, because one of the downfalls of social media is that other than maybe a blue check mark on a Twitter account, there's really, in a lot of cases, not a way for people to distinguish between what is real factual information and what is disinformation. And you can often see the way that disinformation is just spread so rapidly. And once it's out there, there's no way to pull it back.
In many ways, what is an inherent combativeness between the person who is standing at the podium and the person and the people who are sitting in those chairs. And that has ebbed and flowed, I think is probably fair to say, in various administrations over the past couple of decades here. But that's always been the case. I mean, even dating back to, one of my former mentors, Tom Brokaw, right? Like it's always been like that. And I wonder where that line is, because we all have different opinions on it.
I think the way that I have tried to approach the briefing room when I'm in the briefing room is that I don't approach it as a personal thing. I don't approach it as I'm going to attack the press secretary or whoever. I approach it as I am trying to get information. I'm going to ask you a question. I want to get information that will be helpful to the public to understand what is going on. Now, I may press you on things that do not make sense to me, but I'm not trying to, ask you whether you're a good person or not. I don't care about what, how you feel about yourself. That's not my goal. I think different people have had different goals, but for me personally, what I can stand on is that when I try to engage with, anyone that I'm engaging with, it's not a personal thing. It's not me trying to get you or back and forth. It is me trying to get information. That's what I try to do.
I do think, the briefings in the Trump era took on sort of this whole other dimension, right? That got away from what I think Ayesha is talking about here, which is like, what is the purpose of the briefing, right? The purpose of the briefing is supposed to be for the press corps to be able to ask questions on behalf of the public of the people who the president has hired to explain his policies, to explain his actions. And I know that might sound kind of naive, but I actually think that that is the basic purpose of it. And the more you stray from that on both sides, I think the more difficult the relationship gets.
I always felt like the briefings were a place where White Houses could be pressed and they could hone their message, like that they could hone how they would answer and respond to tough questions about how they were operating. That's the way, the benefit for the press is that we're trying to get information and to know exactly where the White House stands. But I also thought there was a benefit to a White House being able to hone their message.
You also have to understand the role that this has to play in a democracy, right? Which is that you have a government that is there through the consent of the people that sent the government there, right? And the consent of the people that sent the opposition party there, and that you have through the press the right and the responsibility to question what they do. And even if Julie or somebody, and they didn't, but if they came in that room thinking that this wasn't on the level or wasn't altogether truthful and wanted to press us on that, that's fine. You have to be an advocate for the press in order to be an effective press secretary, right? And then lastly, you're a spokesperson for the country, as Ari said.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's Americans, not Democratic Americans or Republican Americans.